Good evening, everyone. At this 107 Sunday Sahityak Satsang of iSPELL, we are joined by Dr. Muralikrishnan, sir, the keynote speaker and the Joint Secretary of iSPELL. We are joined by Dr. Madhumita Majumdar, the chairperson of today's event. We are joined by the executive committee members of iSPELL and all the participants. To talk about iSPELL, iSPELL, founded by Professor G.A. Gansham, has been offering a platform to students, research scholars, and teachers in English language and literature. iSPELL has motto to bring the minds together and shape the minds with the fervor for language and literature. Society has established 8 forums to date in Chhattisgarh, Tripura, Rajasthan, South Karnataka, East Maharashtra, West Bengal, and Tamil Nadu. iSPELL has organized several workshops, seminars, conferences, and faculty development programs in collaboration with universities and colleges across India. To widen its network in the interest of fraternity, iSPELL has a great plan ahead, including quality publication, MOUs, literary festivals, offline seminars, and conferences in India. iSPELL forums have been functioning a great role in developing the interest and engagement of students and teachers in the region. Let us take this mission to the heart of change, choice, charity, and champion. Professor Gansham's vision will become a mission, and I am proud, privileged to be part of this. Then we have Dr. Muralikrishnan sir as keynote speaker. I would like to introduce sir. This is my proud privilege to introduce the keynote speaker, Dr. Muralikrishnan TR. Dr. Muralikrishnan is a professor in the Department of English at Sri Shankaracharya University of Sanskrit, Ernakulam. With 27 years of vast teaching experience, Sir is an intellectual versatile in the field of English language and literature. He has a PhD in linguistics, and 2 scholars have been awarded PhD under his guidance. His area of interest comprises ELT, applied linguistics, literary theory, theater, and drama. His professional writings include 15 articles in books, 25 articles in journals, 9 articles in e-journals, 8 articles in seminar and conferences proceedings, 4 publication of books, and 3 popular articles. He is a recipient of the ELTF's Award of the British Council for the year 2014-15. Besides, he completed minor research project. He is a life member of several literary associations and is PhD thesis evaluator. I feel proud to mention that such a man of experience and expression is the Joint Secretary of iSPELL, and he is among us today to deliver the talk. I humbly and warmly welcome you, sir. Please, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Pramod sir, for introducing me. I hope I'm audible on the other side.
Yes, sir, you are.
Okay, okay. Now, respected members of the iSPELL, respected members who are listening to me, executive committee members, and all those who have gathered here for this 107th Sunday Sahityak Satsang. Now, for me, iSPELL has given me a great opportunity over the last 2 years to interact with some of the best people around in the country. And I think this Sunday, I took it as an opportunity to share some of the thoughts, not very long, but at least a brief kind of an introduction to a particular topic which has interested me for last maybe a few months. Actually, this topic came to me, like today's topic came to me as a matter of I should say an offshoot after reading David Goldberg's book Multiculturalism, a critical reader. After reading Goldberg's work, I thought I can connect that with the what we call as say the practice of um, what is happening in the classroom, especially in connection with multiculturalism. So I thought of doing something related to what I'm practicing basically. So that can be shared, with some of my friends through this particular medium. So maybe my friend Pramod can help me by sharing the screen so that I can start with the proceedings. Yeah, thank you. Now, these are the two focus areas. I need to tell you that as far as the presentation is concerned, one is related to multiculturalism, and the other is using what we call as the medium of text in the classroom situation. Now, it is not fully an ELT kind of a thing. It is not part of ELT as such, but I would say that this is meant for the aspiring teachers as well as professional teachers. And I would try to see things from that particular perspective. Now, how do we bring in the concept of multiculturalism into the transaction that is happening within the classroom? So that is what I'm trying to attempt today. Now, there are of course many things which I have not, I should say, brought in because of lack of time, because I have restricted myself to a duration of around 45 to say 60 minutes. But in the meantime, I'll just go through some of the prominent features which I need to focus on. Now, these are the two focus areas. Next. But when we move on to the crucial subtopics, we can call it as in linguistics, we say deep structure. Now, when we move on to the further levels of understanding what we call as multiculturalism and adapting that into the classroom situation, we can see that there is something called what we call as a few very important terminologies which we need to address. Now, for example, I have brought in the concept of critical literacy, which is also, which is, I think, a prominent term that we need to discuss in detail. I have also brought in the concept of multiple transaction that can happen in a classroom, and we call as the student participation in what we call as curriculum, and a possibility of creating a parallel text or an alternative kind of a text. Another important thing that I am planning to present here is the web of significance. It is not a conventional web, it is a web of significance. I'll discuss that in this given duration of time. Moreover, I will also try to differentiate between the so-called liberal perspective and the liberal perception and the multicultural perspective. And finally, towards the end of the presentation, I shall move on to what we call as the strategies and principles and strategies which are required for the sake of making what we call as the concept of multiculturalism productive in a classroom situation. It would be not, I should say, the same, because as we all know, India is such a diverse, having a diverse cultural context and like practices and cultural norms. And again, the kind of text that we have in various educational institutions, various like government textbooks, they are not the same. And we have lakhs of schools, I should say, thousands of schools where we have different text, different kinds of children coming, from different social groups. So I thought let that be seen as a kind of an understanding regarding what we call as a domestic kind of or a national kind of a multicultural outlook in dealing with issues that are important maybe within and outside the country, so that people, the students can become sensitive to some of the issues that we are taking up for discussion inside the classroom. So let us see some of them which are relevant to us. Okay, let us move on to the next. Now, let us begin with the common idea called what literacy is all about. Literacy. Now, generally, literacy is connected with what we call as the facility of now how a person can read, or the ability of a person to read and write. It is something like that. Generally, literacy means that. But here it has some specific connotation. When we say literacy here in this particular context, actually, now what we are trying to bring out is, it is the attempt on the part of the people there to make things apparent and to reveal what we call as something that is hidden, something that is very, very much within, or what we call as the inner workings of particular group or a society, by which each group or each part of the society can define itself in various or what we call as different context. So what we need to understand here is, it is important that each unit should know what happens within these contexts. So there is always called the questioning that is happening. So it is not like what we call as an understanding of just the situation. It is more of a probing of a given situation, a critical, having a critical mind, a critical thinking into the given situation. Now, that is what we are looking at in this particular condition there. That is why I said it's a kind of a changing demographic situation. Next, sir. Now, as you can see, I use this word critical literacy. So it is a kind of an approach. We can call it as a critical approach, like where the students are taught to question, to probe, to inquire, and to open up. Maybe those who are familiar with like the issues proposed by Foucault. Now we know, like to open up the power relations that exist within the workings of a society or a group. So naturally, it encourages like the stakeholders, namely in a classroom situation, we can say the students and the teachers to have what we call as an active role in the very process of learning, and to take action means to think of all possibilities, to go for what we call as action, and rather than being a passive listeners of what is being provided as a textual material. So that scope, generally we are blind, like in the sense I'm not generalizing as far as all classrooms and all situations. Maybe at the college level discussions are more, but whereas in a school situation, things may not be that helpful because teachers will often complain about exams, like assignments, like timetable issues, all that. I agree with all that. I know what is generally happening in such a situation. But it will provide a method. It will provide the method where in which even the teacher, the student, they all can become an agent of change, and we can call it as a change for the better. So that will help them to improve, to find out how unique they are in the given context. That uniqueness is important because we will come to know about it more when we discuss multiculturalism. So each and every social group who are part of what we call as the classroom context, they should know how unique. I'm not talking about the mental ability or what we call as the intellectual ability. I'm talking about the kind of the identity that they carry regarding their social what we call as or socio-ethnic kind of thing, the identity related to that. So we need to think of all perspectives. That is what we understand by the word critical literacy in a classroom situation. Next. Now, that is the we can call it as a summary of what we need to know, what critical literacy is all about. That's why I said now it is a process of becoming literate about what we call as a society or a group. Now, how do they become literate? They become literate through questioning, through seeing things from multiple perspectives, various viewpoints, and to open up the biases in the textual material and a possibility of reading between the lines. These things have to be understood when we talk about multiculturalism in a classroom context. I'll move on to that seriously, or the strategies that we have to take up. And through this kind of analysis, critical analysis, now we need to know that the society will be able to understand how they are what we call as determined in terms of their historical and cultural shape or identity or whatever be. Now these are some possibilities that are opened up through critical literacy. Next. Now ultimately it helps, the critical literacy helps the student to see themselves in the curriculum. Now where do they find themselves in the curriculum? Are they part of the curriculum? Do they see themselves in the curriculum? That's a very important question there. Or do they find any scope to participate in the process of what we call as the pedagogical process, or in the not in terms of teaching and learning. I'm talking about the content that is provided. And also they will try to understand that there is need to expand their worldviews. That is also important, relevant, creating opportunities for understanding about the kind of society they are living in, and to also address a very important question, and also to see the value of their readings, the kind of reading that they do on a given material, and to help them believe that they can change, they can succeed in bringing some kind of a change, or at least to liberate themselves from the clutches of what we call as a particular ideology, where in which the possibility of asking questions can be initiated. And ultimately, we can say that critical literacy helps them, the students, all our students, to own the curriculum. Now, they should feel that it's theirs. That's what I said. They should see themselves in the curriculum. So they should feel that owning, like in the sense, they should feel that they should own that, the curriculum that they learn. So that way, it's a very interesting kind of a concept. Next. Now, another important thing, as I have told you, is to create a parallel text. You have a conventional text given in the classroom, but you should have what we call as an alternative text in the classroom, or a parallel text in the classroom, so that it can incorporate different experiences, diverse viewpoints, and different possible readings of a given situation. So that possibility is generally not there. If you analyze the questions that are given in the textbook that we deal with generally in a classroom, many of them are safe, and many of them, to use a very harsh word, predictable. Predictable in the sense we know what kind of a question that can be asked on a given material, because many things are pushed under the carpet. So what we can think about is a possibility of bringing in, or by invigorating a kind of a different perspective, we can think of what we call as bring an alternative kind of a reading to the given material. And the students, who are able to appreciate the lives, what we call as the lives outside the normal classroom, they can also trigger a kind of a change when they start appreciating the text. So ultimately, it is a kind of going beyond a book, or going beyond the book which is given there. So that will open up what we call as to appreciate, to understand, and to logically follow a different possibility, what we call as a diverse kind of a possibility or a viewpoint, and think of what we call as a new sense of justice, which is not there sometimes in the classroom situation. So a dominant kind of an ideology will be taken as granted or taken for granted by people or maybe by students even at a very young age, maybe around 7 or 10, and they think that it is quite normal to have that kind of a viewpoint. Even the critical questions which are part of the syllabus, which are part of the examination, which are part of the text, now they too follow that particular strategy. Now I'm not saying that it should go against the country or the given state, nothing. It is not like that, or the government. I'm only trying to tell you that, I suggest you that there is a possibility of opening up diverse perspectives which are evident, like which are there but they are not addressed in the textbook, which are not there part of the content as such. So if you endorse that, if you try to bring in that, it can add value to the discussion, so people will feel that this text is mine, in the sense it caters to my kind of an approach to life, my kind of an experience, or his or her unique identity which she carry to the classroom. Yes, next, sir. So what we require is, we need to bring in what we call as, or as I have put it there, integrating multiculturalism in the classroom, so that we can have multiple transactions in the using the text, or maybe different or multiple kind of or leading to what we call as multiple understanding of the text. So what we generally do to the given situation is we merely read the text, and we try to localize or situate those texts according to what they try to tell us or teach us. But when we bring in different perspectives, we can take a different level or a vantage point where which different concepts can be thought about, and it can help to groom what you call as critical thinking among the students even from a young age. Next. Now, just imagine generally what we talk about immigration, migration from one to the other, coming from one country to the other, moving, and you all know the difference between migration and immigration. So there are a number of books, like I need to tell you that, especially travel books and all that, And again, where we have what we call as references to immigration, they talk about what we call as the journey, the separation from one's homeland, and the feeling of loneliness. It's all part of immigration. Yeah, like the feeling of joy that we get, like and a possibility of starting a fresh kind of a life, so on. So all green things, I should say all greenery around. So when we read books, that kind of narratives, we feel that yeah, it is, those are the lives of immigrants. But when we read from a different perspective, we call it as a critical literacy point of view. Now suddenly, we have a different picture emerging there. Let us see the next slide, please. Just see this. I don't want to explain anything here. This is something that we have seen in 2015. This is also part of immigration. And you can see the boy whose name it's given there, Alan Kurdi. And the photo I have already acknowledged, it is given there. So I needn't explain this particular point. So when we write joyously about what we call as the lives of the immigrants, read this also. This is another perspective. So this is something that is missing in general discussion. Maybe for a news purpose, it might survive 2-3 years. After that, people will forget this. Next slide. So what we have to understand here is there is this necessity of what we call as understanding multiculturalism in the given context. Now, naturally, what is multiculturalism? I have already told you there are a number of books on that, and I have I referred to a book already. Now, when we try to study or when we try to learn more about multiculturalism, it tries to actually address that, a certain kind of discrimination, a certain kind of what we call as minority discourses are pushed aside. They are minimized. And they talk about things of the majority community and not the minority community. So the critics of such with such perspectives, they argue that generally what we call as the so-called liberal nations, when you follow the discourses carefully, you will see that the position that they take is generally that of assimilation. Assimilation. We are all familiar with the theory of what we call as the merging of all things together, the melting pot kind of a thing, assimilation into the culture of majority. Or we can also say there is this idea of homogenization coming in, which is of course engendered by the nation state. So what is happening here is the identity of the minority like discourses or maybe minority lives, those things are not taken seriously to discuss about what we call as cultural diversity. So what we need to address here is when we talk about multiculturalism, we need to take that aspect also, which is part of today's discussion. Next slide, please. So please note, I am not talking about pluralism. So those who already know, I needn't explain that. But for those who are listening to this particular topic for the first time, let it be clear, I am not talking about pluralism. Pluralism is a way of a kind of a big heart, hugging everyone together. Like in the sense, yeah, saying that we admire a plurality. Yeah, fine, good. It's all right. But the problem is when we talk about plurality or pluralism, generally the problem is each minority culture, which has a distinct value, they don't get expressed when we talk about pluralism. Of course, they must have shown commitment to the value expressed by these people. But the problem is within the larger framework, as I told you, they are all incorporated, but they are not given the kind of representational value which they require, which they demand, which they actually which is necessitated by the way that the society is emerging. It is not happening. So it is not a matter of just a pluralistic attitude. It is more than that. Next. So it is important. Of course, we are living in a democratic, pluralistic society. Yeah, there is always this what we call as the multicultural policy framework. Yes, yes. But the problem is pluralism, as I have given it here, at that level, societal plane. They talk about coexistence, etc., etc. But when it comes to the core issues, it becomes, in a way, monocultural, or it gives prominence to what we call as the practices and the culture of the dominant community. Now, that is what like those who profess multiculturalism, that is what the criticism is all about when we talk about pluralism. Now, as I have told, it is in a way an engagement with the different discourses which are hidden within the society. But liberal democracies accept that, yeah, we are all living in a pluralistic society. We tolerate differences, etc., etc. Fine, that is all nice. But the problem is at the public domain, or when we look into the what we call as the general majoritarian kind of discourse, there is a great disadvantage or a cultural discrimination when we talk about what we call as representation of those minority kind of cultures. That is what the multiculturalism would talk about. Next. And again, another interesting attitude, we talk about liberalism also. Like liberalism is a kind of an openness to the given issues. We all know what kind of attitude is that. What we call as I have stated here, it is a matter of formal equality. But again, when now they say that we treat everyone equal, individuals are equal before the law, all identities are the same, like there is no kind of discrimination. Yeah, it's all good. But the thing is, when a particular minority culture discourse is like, if it expresses itself into the mainstream, it is either restricted or effaced. In the sense, at the maybe you can have your own identity within your private domain, but a liberal outlook may not every time accept your argument when it comes to public domain. So that crucial line of difference is very clear there. I'll repeat that again. So from the pluralistic or liberal kind of an attitude, or maybe the way that we look at the word or a perspective there, it is all good if you keep it at the public, at the private domain. Yeah, no problem. But don't express that at the public domain, because we are looking at people at a general, in a very broad way, on equal terms. All are equal before law. Fine, yes. But when it comes to expression of those what we call as minority cultures, in what we call as individual kind of things, they are supposed to be restricted to the private and not to the public. So that way, again, they are restricted. That is something which the people, so I should say, people who profess multiculturalism, those who write about multiculturalism, would talk about. Next. So this is one important person, Bill Kimlicka. Kimlicka has extensively written about these kind of things. So what he has said, as it is given here, contrary to the liberal perception, theories of multiple or multiculturalism argue that community identities are bound to enter the public domain, and people may bring into political life issues that arise from their community membership. Now that is where it becomes crucial. So Kimlicka says, when we expect individuals to bracket their cultural identity, we are in fact, as he says, depriving them of something that they are reasonably entitled to. So they can't express themselves, because the scope of what we call as the private domain is so limited, by which they are never even recognized, they are not even seen, they are not visible. So they are naturally forced to express it outside. But once it is outside, the people will challenge about what kind of equality is this. So multiculturalism talks about that particular factor. So Will Kimlicka is a very important theoretician and I should say critic, related to that. Next. So what these theories would tell you is that one needs to acknowledge, so what we call as the identities of such what we call as a minority, or like cultural identities, minority cultural identities. And what we look for is, say, when we try to, as I have already told you, when we try to focus on certain dominant what discourses, and when we try to exclude a community from the political and cultural or the public domain, naturally it can bring a lot of issues related to that. It becomes a kind of an injury to the individual, and it can also affect their sense of esteem about themselves, so that it gives them a kind of a low self prestige, I should say, or low prestige in the public arena. That is the crucial idea related to multiculturalism, which I am trying to discuss here. Next slide, please. Hello, next slide. Yeah. What we require then is, say, in that case, when we create laws, when we create policies, they are always at a disadvantage. That is what, or maybe when we talk about civil rights, political rights, especially in terms of public policies, these people find themselves not fully addressed, or their issues are not fully addressed. And this can also affect, once such things happen at the political level, or at the social level, or the maybe cultural level, naturally it can have its impact on what we call as language. It can have its impact on education, maybe declaration of holidays, dress code, all that. And all these naturally take up problems related to what we call as the conflict between majority and minority. That is something that we need to sorry, that is something that we need to address here. And so, similarly, here in another situation, maybe at the very important what we call as level, I should say, there can be questions related to ceremonial rituals, symbol of the state, and all that. And I don't want to go into specific issues. I think by the time I have like expressed these ideas, many points must have come to your mind, and we will take up if we are allotted time to go into the details. Next. So naturally, the central principles of what we call as a liberal democracy, especially what we call as the notion of formal equality and neutrality, these things are not fully addressed, and we need to find out ways to have what we call as the group differentiated rights and differentiated citizenship. So that is what, when we address these issues, these kind of things come up, and they are always at the top level of what we call as, or it gets priority when it comes to the discussion of these issues. Go to the next slide, sir. So it all begins with, I should say, that the theory of multiculturalism begins by locating the individual. So before I move on to the classroom situation, when I discuss the theory, we need to find out what is the position of the individual within the given community, the cultural community. And one can easily understand that no state, whatever it be or wherever it be, it cannot be completely be neutral. One cannot take a neutral position every time. No, but as you all know, even liberal states, I'm not about taking a single country here by name, but we can say that, it's very difficult to make neutral laws. And I have given some examples related to, say, for example, marriage, divorce, property, inheritance, mercy killing, euthanasia, suicide, all those things. Now, when we take up social issues, or so maybe rituals, or issues related to what we call as laws related to certain things, it may not be favorable to what we call as the minority kind of. I'm not talking about minority communities. I'm talking about not always like that. I'm not keeping a particular community in my mind. I'm trying to tell you that now these things generally come up, especially the division between public domain and private domain. Next. So there can be a problem there. When I keep on telling about this, people might think that multiculturalism is something like anti-liberal. No. It doesn't imply that. Actually, it goes beyond all that. Like the position of pluralism, the position of liberal kind of an outlook, or what we call as a cosmopolitan, or whatever be the name that you give, it goes beyond all that. It's a kind of a different level, a different playing ground, where we have to see things in a multicultural society. We have to address these issues at a different level. It's not like equality in the term that we understand it now. So what the theorist of multiculturalism would say is that now these possibilities, these alternatives that they think about, or that they take as a point of view, they say that liberal democracies should be inconsistent with the liberal idea of equality for all. Fine, good, that is there. But the thing is, when we talk about equality, there should be a system of special rights. It's not a matter of privilege, actually. It is a kind of a special right that is which is required or advocated to protect these kind of cultures, so that at the public domain these things are not discriminated. So certain special rights have to be understood or taken up. That's what a multiculturalist would say. Next slide. And as I have told according to Kimlicka, so the requirement is to supplement the existing framework of individual based rights with special arrangements that allow, or that there is a possibility of giving minority cultures to survive and flourish in society. But please note, I have added a rider there. Special rights are not supported or endorsed unconditionally. That doesn't mean that they can do whatever they like, because it requires a kind of public common sense. And again, which is a popular decision. I know it is not easy to come up with what we call as the idea of common sense, I know, but it doesn't endorse unconditional kind of a support for all special kind of rights. So that is why I don't use the word privileges. I said rights because if they practice it according to certain norms, in the sense which they themselves can explain, it has to be endorsed, it has to be supported. And I have already made this in relation with the immigrant issue. Next slide, please. So the need is to bring in some special cultural right. That is what I don't like endorse anything like a special zone for them, or a place for them, or a public arena for them. I don't endorse all that, in the sense as part of this presentation. But what I would suggest is there is a need for what according to multiculturalism, the need is to have special cultural right. And there is what we call as a recognition for the minority cultural institutions and financial assistance for running cultural centers or educational institutions, etc. Now, these are some of the things that, of course, that they have taken shape in our own country. Next. And so, according to that particular perspective, a good society cherished the diversity of and encourages a creative dialogue. Now, that's very important between its different cultures and their moral visions. So, a stability of a multicultural society depends on what we call as the sense of belonging, or what we call as a common sense of belonging among its citizens. Next. Now, I need to focus on that, because if you ask me a question, I have already anticipated I know what kind of questions that can come. So I have added this statement just to justify myself regarding the possibility of some of the questions I know can come. Say, for example, India has managed to persist for 7 decades as a territorially intact and a successful polity. Because why? The judicious balance between unity and diversity embodied in. So the answer is Indian Constitution. So everything is when I get a kind of a question, I know to where to fall back on. So Indian Constitution is where I need to focus on if such questions come up. Wait, we'll move on to that. Now, how to use these kind of things and perspectives and ideas into the classroom experiences, or how do we bring in, usher in such a sensibility in a classroom? That is actually topic number 2. So we are moving on to the next or the last level of this discussion, where we have how to move on to that. Next slide, please. So we need to find out something called, it is not a matter of identifying what interests students, and again, so there are 2 processes. Seeing what interests students means what do they take interest in. Similarly, what needs to be covered in the classroom in terms of content. So 2 things are generally taken up for what we call as discussion as part of like using as a text. So in order to accommodate the feedback from the students, now what we call as we use a technique called webbing technique. so that we will know what they want to learn and how, like, the kind of learning that they require. But more than that, we can create something called a web of significance. So when we talk about multiculturalism, we can also bring in the idea called web of significance. Next slide. So what is that? A web of significance is something like a concentric circles, right? As a ripple effect, we can say in water. So if you put a stone in water, you know what happens. And there can be circles, concentric circles. So we have the outer circle, the larger circle, and the inner circle, or the inclusive circles. So let us first put down the main topic that they'll be learning for school. So the topic will be big enough or broad enough so that there can be what we call as multiple perspectives, and they can write down all the topic connected with their real lives, or maybe in the present times or the past or the future, etc., based on the significance of the topic. And then depending on this connectivity between the subject and their aspirations, now we can understand why do they, we need to outline that, why do they need to learn all that. So what they would like to learn and know for themselves, so from there we can add more and more data. We can be ready with more and more resources. We can do what we call as a research on that, in the sense a kind of an inquiry that can happen within the class. So we can create a whole lot of data based on some fundamental questions, and then what we call as having a ripple effect inside the classroom. Go to the next slide. We can that is what, yeah, exactly. And this is what we get in a classroom situation. This is what we say as one of the possible models of web of significance, where there are other possibilities of looking at this also. So at the primary level, we have a set of topics. At the secondary, tertiary, like that, we can have a set of topics coming up or emerging in that, and we can add more and more details into that. This is one way of bringing in what we call as divergent point of views. We can accommodate more and more concepts into that, depending on their experiences and connecting themselves with the text that they have, the content that they have. Next. So they become a real participant. They become a real participant in this kind of an inquiry by adding more what we call as interest in the activity, or bringing more interest in the activity. And we can have a lot of questions related to that, so that the scope of inquiry will be like kindled in each and every student, because they themselves create the kind of content. Because from the core idea which is given in the content, the textbook, they try to branch out and bring in more and more related concepts that they know. Maybe it is not possible with all topics that they learn in the textbook, but still, if you show them, if you trigger them some kind of related material which possibly they might know, you can have what we call as this web of significance. Next. So another important thing is to have what we call as a library in the schools or the colleges, where we have the possibility of multicultural children's literature. So in schools, it helps them to identify different perspectives and different perceptions related to what we call as languages, races, gender, class. Now, all those fundamental questions related to the society, they will read more, or they can be given more opportunity to read based on these things. So they can easily connect what is happening in the classroom to the material that is given in the library, so that they keep on what we call as linking their share of experiences, what they have read in the library, with what, or maybe in the newspaper, with what they try to build in the classroom as a web of significance. So this is one area, like children's literature. Now, next slide, please. Now, this is a very popular example of this rainbow fish. As you can see, it is written by a story by Marcus Pfister. You can see there is this beautiful rainbow fish, and it has got what we call as a rainbow colored scales, but it is all alone. It has no friends. So one day this octopus, a wise octopus in the story, advises the fish to share his so the colorful rainbow scales by giving one to each to the other fish, so that it can distribute that and make it like in the sense, so that this idea of sharing income. So the rainbow fish does so and gains friends. So giving these colors to the friends, it becomes it gains a lot of. So this will tell us this sweet story of sharing. But from the multicultural perspective, or what we call as a critical reading of the story, it can give us something really different. Go to the next. So in the world of fishes, that is what one needs to understand. When one reads this world through the words of this text, one learns that, and it is interesting. Sometimes one has to compromise in order to be part of the larger group. So it goes on distributing his own kind of colors, or its own kind of colors. So one learns that sometimes conformity means those fishes who doesn't have those colors, is better than uniqueness or standing out of the group. And that sometimes in order to be assimilated, a very important, powerful word, in order to be assimilated, one has to make some tough choices. So the fish had a tough choice to make. What is that? To give up all those, what we call as uniqueness, the colorful things that they had, or that it had. So suddenly, while giving it up, it became, or it merged with the society. So just see the interesting aspect of this particular story. So when children reads, they will come to know about the first message of the story, like sharing gives happiness. Fine, good. At the same time, at another level, it also like prompts us to think differently. What happens is, in order to assimilate oneself to the major stream or the mainstream, you will have to lose something which is precious, which really makes you unique. Okay, next. Now, similarly, we have another story by, not the same kind of a story. It is by as we can see, by Regina Hansen, The Tangerine Tree. Maybe some of the teachers must have read this. Next. And again, the story is given there, like it is related to the main character's father's immigration to the United States for work opportunities, job opportunities. Now, this is a very touching story there. But I don't want to go into the details, but similar things can happen, when you talk about immigrant related to this kind of stories. We don't have time to go into the details now. I think this is one story. Next, please. Another one is Angelina's Island. Again, a beautiful story by Winter. You have another kind of an experience. Next slide. You have what we call as a depiction of an immigrant child's experience, who dislikes the peculiarity of her new home, New York. She is from the West Indies, but she doesn't like the place. And until one day, as you can read there, so when she participated in the West Indian Day parade, suddenly she get what we call as a feeling that she has some kind of a feeling of what is being, or what is to be at home. That kind of feeling comes. So like that, there are so many children's literature coming up. Next. Now, what are the common strategies? This is the last part, please. Next. Now, what are the strategies? The process is like this. You can choose a very broad main topic to learn for school. And then what you have to do is show the significance of this topic. Like, how does it connect to their real lives? That is one. That is the way it operates. The process is like this. Now, it is not enough. You have to create a motive. Show them why they need to learn about this particular topic. Now, give some what you call the idea of motivation or a triggering factor, as I said. And again, give them choices. What do they want to learn about this particular topic? What interests them? Why do they take interest in this particular topic? And then, if possible, especially in these days, it is there because of ICT, you have a variety of multimedia resources, and they can choose the best thing that is available. And then you can have what we call as the display, the web of significance, so that it can be pasted on the wall, so that they can take the appropriate what we call as topic which is connected with that web of significance. This is one process that I would like to suggest. Next. And again, as I have told you at the beginning of this discussion, this is related to what we call as critical literacy. Now, what is the angle that we should not miss? So what real life issue, now that is also important, does this school or curriculum topic relate to? So this is very important. What is the real life issue that, and again, what kind of a real life issue that has happened, that has happened or is happening, which is connected with this particular topic. The child or the student there can ask this question himself. If I were a professional working or living with this kind of a real life say event or in this particular context or issue, how am I going to deal with that? Now, again, you can have what we call as references that I can draw, that the historical aspects related to that, what has happened before, etc. All these can be brought in. Then what can I do to change and learn from the event? Maybe the event has happened. If I were to approach this in this, so according to my kind of a judgment, how do I change this? Or how do I want to change this? So how do I want to solve this issue? So how do I, and what do I learn from this? Very important, especially in history. It's a very important question. And how can I connect this curriculum topic to my current situation so that I can understand that situation better? And if that happens now in the country or in the state or in the village, now what can I do about it? What, at least from the perspective, now what kind of a fresh perspective or way of thinking I can make on this particular thing? And how do I judge, like how my actions going to affect others, maybe now or later or in the future? These things can happen when we look at that, if you have what we call as a well-developed critical literacy among your students. This is one way of looking at it. Next. And Louis, in way back in 2006, has suggested 7 principles to achieve this. Like, first one is to look at the authenticity of the story and understanding the ethnic characters, the world of the ethnic characters, and looking at the world from those perspectives, the characters' perspectives, and identifying values that shape the characters' conflict or maybe the resolution strategies and all that. And again, relating to the text self, to the text, and critiquing the portrayal of the character in the text, or maybe in the popular media also, doing a critique of that. Then using variants of the same story to build a schema for discussion, or maybe a collection of stories related to that. And again, talking about it, writing about it, responding based on such multicultural text. So you don't miss a point actually. Now, various perspectives are brought in. So that means the majoritarian discourses are naturally subverted by such what we call as socially minor, in the sense minority discourses. These can bring in what we call as the multicultural literacy that is happening in the classroom. Next. And again, also there is a situation where we have what we call as an open-ended connecting with the story discussion among them. So there must be an ability to, or a time to, or a framework to discuss these things either in small groups or whole class, and what they felt about the story. Was it good or what is bad? Were they sad about it, happy about it? And what we call as the possibility of intertextual connections. Now, have they heard about similar things? Is there anything that they have experienced, etc.? Or maybe developing a deeper understanding of the story, that is also there, and providing information about the author, the illustrator, all that, like based on the content that they have got. And finally, what we call as the critique of the story, very important. As I have told you, it is also important not just to have what we call as an understanding, but to have specific questions based on the incidents that are there, so that they might understand better what had happened and how they could have been avoided, what are the real issues behind that. I have given some samples there also, which are there for obviously to read. Next. Now, these are some of the books which I found interesting. You know, like that, some of the well, say developed countries, they actually create a list, what we call as a book list of multicultural. Means transitioning to kindergarten. So this is one book which is there. As I've given you the site, their website also. So when you refer to this book, it's a small book, but it can help the student to move from one system to that of the another. Next. And this is a few of the things that we have in our state, and I'm sharing to my friends in North India, where we have stories from various other continents, but this is taught in connection with what is happening in or what must have happened in our state during 1940s or 1860s, etc. So you have somebody like writing up, say you have a poem, and based on that point we have discussions like that, you know. So this is a representative, you know? It creates a ripple in the classroom, and then you can have a schema there, or maybe a web there, by which you can write all possibilities. Another text is also there in the next slide. It is maybe my friends from Tamil Nadu might easily follow this. So the Dalit novelist. Now that is also there, you know, like a representation from the south. Again, the students in Kerala will be able to follow this text better, because some of the social issues in our state or were there during 1940s can be taken up for discussion, or if it is still there, we can be taken up for discussion. Next one. Gita, another Tamil and English writer, like a social historian. Now, if you read this and then connect with the activity that we are going to conduct in the classroom, yes, that is also good, because we can easily correlate, because this material can help, you know, to create what we call as a parallel text, a series of text for the students, so that students from each different categories in terms of cultural representations can contribute and say something about themselves, so that other people will come to know and appreciate. So it becomes a, what we call as a heterogeneous kind of mutually respecting students, you know, that can be deeply engendered in the classroom. Next. And this is related to ecology. I needn't speak more about that. Of course, that is also significant in the context where that we live. Next. Yeah. It is, we all know that Bangari Matai. Again, it is there on the YouTube also. This is a famous story, and I think most of the teachers must have seen that YouTube there, where what she has narrated as a story, how a hummingbird can fight wildfire. Of course, it has been now very popular in the WhatsApp messages also, in different languages. That is also there. So this is one way of, again, bring in another kind of sensibility and sensitivity to the learners in the classroom. Next. Yeah, these are some of the references. I told you everything starts from, for me, as far as David Goldberg is concerned, Multiculturalism, a critical reader, and those, and again, Gopalakrishnan's book, Multicultural Children's Literature, a critical issues approach, that is also important. So I have made use of these material. I'm sure you can also conduct similar kind of discussions, making use of your textbooks in the state, so that this idea becomes very popular. As I have told you, it can create a heterogeneous atmosphere within the classroom, respecting each other's identity. Thank you. Last slide. Thank you for the opportunity given.
Thank you, sir, for wonderful deliberation and enlightening all the participants. Really, you pointed out how multicultural text bring out a systematic process to change the mentality and to develop an understanding of equality and adjustment and adaptation. Thank you, sir. Now the platform is open for interaction. I just allow two participants unmute. Yes.
Good evening, sir. Dr. Murali, sir.
Yeah, good
Can I?
evening. Am I audible there?
Yes,
Yeah,
sir.
yeah.
Yeah,
Can you hear me?
Yeah, okay.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, of course.
yeah.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, it was a beautiful deliberation. But ultimately, I would like to know what is a multicultural approach to teaching and learning? Um, what kind of an approach would a teacher adopt in the
Now,
classroom?
I have, uh, yeah, I think I have followed the question. Now, multicultural in the sense, actually, it is not a one plan or a one kind of a plan that is there, It depends on the kind of classroom that you have, the kind of text that you have, the kind of students that you have, the kind of environment that you have. Now, all those are factors, not just kind of what a theory that can be applied to any classroom. No, it depends on the
Okay.
material that you use, the kind of
Yeah.
it depends on the kind of things that you want to discuss in the classroom, the kind of what we call as issues that you would like to take up, as I have told you, an alternative kind of a text that you would like to
Yeah.
create in the classroom, so that
Yeah.
it enriches the entire experience, so that the idea of what we call as respecting and what we not, it is not a matter of integrating. I'm talking about
Yeah.
respecting somebody's identity is very important, not in terms of any other thing. Please note, we
Yeah.
are living in a multicultural society, and there are so
Yeah.
many issues despite 70 years of independence. So what we require is not just accommodation, not just endorsement, but a kind of what like
Critical thinking and general
yeah,
acceptance. A
it is
kind of
not
a
not just critical thinking. Through
uh,
critical thinking, not just an acceptance, but we need to understand that it is more of an equality. He has or she has
yeah.
that kind of a space which is required, just as I get as my privilege. So if I am
Okay.
privileged, she should also be privileged enough to express and to live and to survive in this world.
Okay. In this light, at the undergraduate level, long back, we've had Things Fall Apart by Chinua Achebe. I thought
Yeah,
that
yeah.
could be a kind of a thing where most of the tribes, we could relate to them because similar kind of practices, the kind of tribes we have in our place, there's a lot of similarity and things of that kind. So when we look at their experiences, probably uh, we could relate and accept or something of the kind. That thought came into my mind. I don't know. We
Yeah,
need
yeah,
to put a
yeah,
lot
of
of
course,
thinking
yes.
into it. Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
there is no yes or no. There is no wrong or right about this.
I know. We
Every,
need to analyze
yeah,
further.
every. I
Yeah.
think, Dr. Pushpa. I think I'm clear there. Like, it is not like I am right, and let me also
I
be.
know.
Yeah, like let
Yeah.
me
This is like
also take this opportunity to
you've
say that
opened a
you are
new
also right. No.
platform. You've
Yeah.
opened a new platform for everybody to think about and then go deep into it and arrive at their own understanding and come out with it.
Yeah.
Probably help students also to look into it in different
Yeah,
perspectives.
it should be nourished in the classroom, not outside.
Yeah,
School
yeah,
or the undergraduate levels, that is
yeah,
the best place to start this kind of a discussion. So we
yeah,
can have a healthy society. That's good.
yeah. That's true. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Uh,
Thank you.
a question in the chat box from Dr. KG Veena. I read, Sir, your exposition is fantastic as usual. Sir, could you please give a few solutions to the practical difficulty in the semester system, wherein completing the vast syllabus is itself a real challenge? And how could we encourage discussion on various other books with same or varied ideas?
Uh, well, I have no answers to that. Sorry to tell you, because that depends on the way that you take up the issue of time. In a classroom situation, because that depends on the management of time. To put it as straight as possible, I know there are difficulties, but I think before you introduce a course, actually, the time that you begin to launch a particular course in a given semester, you can already suggest that let us not be restricted to the just what we call as the idea of writing exams and passing through that and reading some fundamental text. There are more things which are relevant as part of discussion. So maybe a matter of in a 1 hour lecture, something like 5 minutes can be, or 5 to 10 minutes maximum, can be contributed to references to other stories. If the library of the given education institution is really good, you can prompt them to go and find out things like that. It is not necessary that every time these books should be brought in for discussion. What I suggest is students can be asked to relate themselves, and you can create a web of significance in the classroom, and if you have time, you can ask the students to paste a few, maybe 10 to 12 web of significance in the classroom, or you can upload that in a blog. If you can create a blog, you can use that so that the students can easily read similar materials when they get time, or maybe you can provide them with YouTube links with similar kind of discussions, and maybe films and other audio materials, or maybe visual materials. It is possible, but that depends on the management of time. I know, because I am also a teacher, I am also evaluating assignments, I am also evaluating seminar papers, I am also teaching. There are so many things working on that we are working on. I accept it, but at the same time, there are possibilities. But of course, those are some limitations. Those are our limitations and limitations of our system. Thank you for the question.
Thank you, sir. Then I think no questions are there. All are enlightened with your talk. And let us turn to the next part of the session. Here, I would like to invite today's chairperson, Dr. Madhumita Majumdar. Dr. Madhumita Majumdar, doctorate from University of Jadavpur, is presently an associate professor and head of the Department of English at Diamond Harbour Women's University, West Bengal. She has been teaching for 19 years. Her areas of interest are Victorian literature, Indian writing in English, with major interest in Dalit literature. She has presented over 80 papers at national and international seminars and 50 articles to her credit in reputed journals and books. She has been involved in translation projects primarily from Bengali to English. She is presently the president of iSPELL West Bengal Forum. Welcome, ma'am. May I invite Dr. Madhumita Majumdar. Unmute, ma'am. Yourself. Ma'am, you are muted.
Yeah. Good evening, everyone. It is a pleasure to be here today and listening to Dr. Muralikrishnan's deliberation on this attempt to take multiculturalism texts readings in classrooms. In his lecture, as he was talking, Dr. Muralikrishnan had mentioned and talked about the necessity of, the uniqueness of, let's say, a particular culture that needs to be identified when you are, not only teaching, perhaps, when it comes to reading a particular text. What I felt, he was trying to develop a kind of a reception theory here. A reception theory, I wouldn't just put it in the reader's perspective, but the reception theory as a kind of a response to the process of reading, to the process of understanding. And I think he took up, two very pertinent examples, just not examples, but pertinent issues, I would say, when he talked about the immigrant policies, issues have affected the identity of not only nations and boundaries, but also cultural formation. Presently, we do see that, in this Russian-Ukraine war, of course, on which side will the world turn to, or empathize with? It brings out also the position of the immigrants. Apart from relating oneself to such experiences, what also becomes very impertinent in such multiculturalism spaces, where we talk about liberalism, where we talk about democracy, and I think he was also talking about cultural diversity. He was also talking about social justice. What becomes very necessary in such spaces is that you don't create stereotypes. Okay, because that is also the problem, because when you're talking about, let's say, within multiculturalism, you're talking about giving voice, or giving understanding, giving what will I say, as Dr. Muralikrishnan was saying, also, giving them an active role in the process of expression. So, beyond that, what is also important, that, there is a certain amount of identification that needs to be created. The problem, that, how do you really introduce, let's say, texts within curriculum which might not have a resonance, perhaps the experience might not be resonating with the students that are being taught, or perhaps the one who is teaching. So there can be experiences, which go beyond the point of resonance, when it can be resonated, like, this immigrant issues, or if you talk about the casteism, if you talk about, the minority, not in terms of just religion, sectarism, but, the minority in any sense of term. The thing that you will have to realize, that, as Dr. Muralikrishnan rightly pointed out, these multiculturalism needs to come because it affects our way of thinking, from the kind of, he said, the holidays that are given in a particular nation, or let's say the kind of um, policies, or education that we get, or let's say the kind of uh, definitions of culture that we get, all get affected. What kind of inclusivity is there in this process of multiculturalism? I was also, affected and deeply moved by these words like conformity and assimilation. That is also, I think, a problem with multiculturalism, that, that you, at the end of the day, you need to conform, through that particular story of that rainbow fish, as Dr. Muralikrishnan was pointing out, that it was just not about the process of sharing, but also assimilation, of perhaps, integrating yourself. But it is also, in a certain way, losing your identity. That is the crux of any multiculturalism, that, what identity are you able to retain? How much of that identity is allowed is also a point, because what is finally engrossed, or what is finally accepted, is, of course, very, very problematic within the multicultural spaces. So in classrooms, I felt that, as I was hearing, Dr. Muralikrishna's talk, I think, we should also uh, understand that, perhaps the consistency and the way that a specific culture is represented, or let's say the time frame of that particular representation, sometimes, affects our illustrations or understanding of, let's say, of gender in that particular text, or let's say, or the information that is given. We are also bound within this cultural periphery, to think about what is accurate, that, what will be, accurate for a multiculturalism space, what would be accurate when you are actually trying to teach, let's say, multicultural text. What kind of inclusivity will you talk? In doing so, we fall into perhaps sometimes the trap of a certain bias or a certain choice that we are taking. So naturally, what what we should, understand that within a multicultural space, or reading of a particular text, we should not be concerned about the many isms, whether it is a depiction of the minority, or whether it is a depiction of something which is unique, but perhaps accept the experience that is being presented. So moving towards that acceptance, I think perhaps will allow a kind of a more liberal approach, for such studies. And I think, that is what the lecture by Dr. Muralikrishnan was driving us towards. It is not about, talking about conformity. It is not about assimilation. It is not about uniqueness. It is just not about individuality, but, an acceptance of the presentation of the experience as it is told. Because, most of the texts, if I could, break them down and say, they would also be story narratives. They would be telling you a story. So the storytelling or the narrative has definitely a purpose. Of course, the narrator has a particular location. The narrator could also come with a particular agenda. Of course, the storyteller, it could be the authorial voice, or the author chooses, multiple voices to actually authenticate and say that this process of storytelling is what I expect people to respond. So as readers, as a student of literature, what I feel that, multiculturalism is about, opening that, idea of hearing or listening. I'm reminded of, this tale of Frankenstein, where, there are passages within the text where you would see, the monster complaining to Frankenstein and telling that if you had listened to me, and it within a paragraph, there are at least 10 times that the monster says that if you had listened to me, perhaps this story or my narrative would not be, what I am, or the space that I am in. So multiculturalism, at the end of the day, I believe, and I hope, Dr. Muralikrishnan agrees with me on that particular point, is, inviting that process of listening. It is just not about response. It is not about, identifying, political, social, economic spaces or conflicts, and not being just aware of them, but, also listening to them. The more you do that, I think that, that area, or that space which we would want to call a liberal multicultural domain can come into existence. So once again, it was wonderful hearing to this, deliberation, and, I think it opened our minds to a lot of things, as educators, as teachers, as students. Of course, we take back a lot of our values. And of course, that example of Bama, where she talks, talking about these occasions, are also very important, because multiculturalism is also, talking about what has not been heard before, or what has not been said before, or what we have not been comfortable hearing, also breaking this hegemonic idea of, what can be heard, what can be listened, or what can be told. So thank you so much. And it was wonderful being here.
Thank you, ma'am, for having a very valuable remark on the deliberation. Now, I request Professor G. A. Gansham, Founder and General Secretary of iSPELL, to have concluding remark and presentation of certificate. Please, sir.
Thank you, Pramod. Always it's a pleasure listening to the people on the platform of iSPELL. And today is the 107th Sunday Sahityak Satsang on the platform of iSPELL. We have been not only proceeding further, but at the same time, we are building the community of learners. We are building the community of resource persons. We are building the community of future readiness kind of a thing. And in that way, iSPELL is not only moving farther and wider, but it's strengthening its ground. And for that, I wish each and everyone a very happy collaboration with iSPELL, because without collaboration, cooperation, and coordination, we cannot emerge as a winner. So it's togetherness which has not only blended, but also has mended many of the minds with the recent trends. And listening to Dr. Muralikrishnan on the platform, any platform, is always a kind of a feast, because Muralikrishnan comes with various what you call it as documents. He comes out with various theories, he comes out with various authors, and it is being said unheard melodies are sweeter, as the chairperson was telling. So these are many of the unheard melodies which he has shared on the platform of iSPELL today as the keynote speaker, or rather the resource person. Yes, whenever the person speaks on the platform of iSPELL, and he not only makes us to understand various nuances related to the language and literature, but at the same time the person makes us understand how to read between the lines. And that's the most important aspect of any of the deliberation. We need to understand the read between the lines, and not only the text, but the hidden text and also the hypertext which is involved in it has a greater significance in our lives. Also, being a researcher, being a teacher, being a learner, being a student, we need to understand all these things. So for doing the honors on the platform of iSPELL, I really thank Dr. Muralikrishnan, the Joint Secretary of iSPELL India. At the same time, I thank the chairperson, Madhumita Majumdar, who not only summed up entire thing in a nutshell, but at the same time she has pointed out various things which are related with our everyday kind of venture, like teaching within the four walls and making the students understand what we are teaching. Identity always is an entity for which we all are here, and identity, and that too relate it to the spaces, and the spaces created by us, created by the society, and then when we relate ourselves with that, then it certainly gives a much more wider and larger meaning to it. So thank you very much, Dr. Madhumita Majumdar, for doing the honors on the platform of iSPELL. iSPELL, as it says, facilitate to elevate. We try to facilitate people not only to elevate them, but also to elevate the society in general. Because if we elevate the society, then only the real purpose of forming this kind of a society will come into action. So this certificate on behalf of iSPELL is awarded to Dr. Muralikrishnan TR as a token of gratitude. Kindly accept it, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. And this certificate goes to Dr. Madhumita Majumdar for doing the honors on the platform of iSPELL as the chairperson. And for the first time, we have seen Madhumita Majumdar as the chairperson on the platform of iSPELL. And we do hope that many of the people from various forums of iSPELL will be there on the platform of iSPELL, sharing their ideas in the form of resource persons, chairpersons, and master of ceremonies. Ma'am, kindly accept it.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
And this is our the month of October, which is full of Durga Puja, Navratri, and Dashahara. Everything is there in the month of October. And this October is going to be coordinated by Dr. Pushpa Puamma, who is going to bring out various authors on the platform of iSPELL, right from USA to Bengaluru and Uttar Pradesh. She's bringing all the scholars on the platform of iSPELL. Then from 108 to 112th Sunday Sahityik Satsang, she is going to take care of two of the USAs and one writer and one from Bengaluru and one from Uttar Pradesh. Hope we will have a grand feast on the in the month of October, and also during Dashera also we will be able to witness a wonderful kind of congregation as far as iSPELL is concerned. This is the beauty of iSPELL, wherein we are giving chance to various other people to bring many people as much as possible, so that we can find the new faces with new ideologies and new concepts and new theories, and also the deliberation must go in a great way. So thank you very much, Dr. Pushpa Puamma, for taking the responsibility as the coordinator for the month of October. And thank you very much, Pramod, the unsung hero of iSPELL, who is always behind the curtain. But for the first time on the platform of iSPELL in the month of September, he has come on the silver screen of iSPELL as the coordinator, and for doing the honors on the platform of iSPELL. Pramod, I wish you all the very best, and there is a long way for you to lead. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Now it's time to propose the vote of thanks. Being the event coordinator for this month, I express my thanks to Dr. Saurabh Banerjee, keynote speaker, Dr. Sarita Jain, the chairperson, Sangamitra Kunsam, MOC at the 104th Sunday Sahitik Satsang. I express my thanks to Dr. Captain Indrani Amma, the keynote speaker, Dr. Sweta Bajpayee, chairperson, and Mr. E. Arun Kumar, MOC, at the 105th Sunday Sahitik Satsang. I am thankful to Dr. Kshamta Chaudhary, keynote speaker, Dr. Sabreen Ahmed, the chairperson, and Mr. Nurul Oda, MOC, at 106th Sunday. I am delighted to express my thanks to Dr. Muralikrishnan for his enlightening talk as keynote speaker today. I am thankful to Dr. Madhumita Majumdar, the chairperson, who wonderfully shared her valuable remark over the deliberation. I humbly express my thanks to Professor Anupama Ora, the president of iSPELL, Dr. Ashok Sachadeva, the vice president of iSPELL, Dr. Payal Datta Chaudhary, the joint secretary of iSPELL, for their respective presence as guest of honor at the Sunday Sahityik Satsang. I extend my thanks to Dr. Shalini Yadav for the media coverage of each event. Thank you, ma'am. I am highly grateful to Professor G.A. Gansham, the founder and general secretary of iSPELL, for being present as guest of honor and giving me this opportunity as event coordinator. I am obliged for his support and cooperation. Thank you, sir. Whatever appreciation I receive from various members and forums, the credit goes to Professor Gansham, sir. Last but not least, I humbly express my thanks to students, research scholars, teachers, and office bearers of all the forums and executive committee members of iSPELL India for gracing all the events of this month. Thank you. Namaskar.
Pramod, you haven't shared the certificate of the coordinator.
Yeah, sir. Next time.
Right.